Okay. This meeting is being recorded. It's your sister's birthday? Well, happy birthday. You should call her. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, Parshas Vayakhel Pekudei, double parsha. It's nice to have one of those. The parsha starts off with something that's very, very difficult to understand. I think we should jump just like right into it. Pasuk says, "Vayakhel Moshe es kol hadas bnei Yisrael vayomer aleichem ela hadvarim asher tzivah Adonai la'asos osam." Hashem says, Moshe gathers all the Jews together, and he says, these are the things that God has commanded to do. Okay, what are the things that God has commanded to do? Well, 6 yamim te'aseh malacha vayom hashvi'i yelachem kodesh Shabbat shabbosom l'Adonai kol ha'oseh bo malacha yumas. 6 days work shall be done, and on the 7th day you're going to have holy Shabbos to Hashem. Anyone who does malacha is going to die. Lo svaru eish b'chol moshvosechem b'yom ha'Shabbos. You should not make a fire anywhere in your cities on the Shabbos day. And Moshe says to all the Jews, this is what Hashem is commanded to do. Take Truma and bring it to the Mishkan, and that's really what we're talking about, right? So we've been talking about this since Parshas Truma. We had Truma, Tetzaveh, then we had Kisisa, and now we're going to once again go over basically everything that we said in the Parshas of Truma and Tetzaveh. So he tells the people now, this is going to be the Truma that you take, Zav, Kesef, Nechoshes, Cheles, Argamon. It's word for word. It's word for word the beginning of Parshas Truma, because he's now relaying the commandment to make the Mishkan to the Jewish people, because you recall that the last time Hashem was telling him to make the Mishkan, the Jews were down at the bottom of the hill doing something a little bit, shall we say, questionable with a cow of metal, and all sorts of terrible things ensued. And Hashem and Moshe had to go up again another 2 times to get forgiveness, to get the second set of luchos, and he comes down and immediately he tells them about the tziva of Meleches HaMishkan. Now, of course, the thing that doesn't make any sense is, why are you telling me about Shabbos again? I mean, goodness gracious, great balls of fire. How many times do you want to tell me about Shabbos? The first time you told me about Shabbos was, well, actually in Bereshis, technically. But the first time you commanded the Jews for Shabbos was according to the Gemara in Mara, which is in the beginning of not the beginning, which is right after the Az Yashir in Parshas B'Shalach. It says in Mara, Sham Samlo Choku Mishpat B'Sham Nisahu, which means there HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave them Chok and Mishpat, and one of the mitzvos that the Gemara understands Choku Mishpat to mean is Shabbos. The Gemara understands this and teases it out from the second time that we read the Aseret Dibros in Parshas Va'eschanan in Sefer Devarim. And it says over there in the Aseret Dibros in Parshas Va'eschanan Shamor as Yom HaShabbos l'Kadsho. Over there, it doesn't say Zachor, it says Shamor, and it says Kasher Tzivi Sicha, as I commanded you. So to which the Gemara says, what do you mean, as I commanded you? In Mara. So Hashem already commanded you the first time to keep Shabbos in Mara, and then the second time by the Mun, and then the third time in the Aseret Hadibros, and then the fourth time in Parshas Kisisa, because right before HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave the Luchos to Moshe, right before. So it's I don't have the Stone edition with me right now, but it's in Perek Lamed Aleph, so it's chapter 31. Right before Hashem gives the luchos to Moshe, the pasuk says, "Vayitenu Moshe kechalaso daber to bahar Sinai shnei luchos haidus," and Hashem gave Moshe, when he finished talking to him on Har Sinai, the 2 tablets of testimony. What does it say right before that? What is the paragraph that immediately precedes HaKadosh Baruch Hu giving the luchos to the Jewish people? Vayomer Hashem Moshe limor, va'ato daber b'nei Yisrael limor, akas Shabbos osai tishmoru. Keep my Shabbos, ki osi beini uveinechem l'daski, etc., etc., etc. It says, "V'shamru b'nei Yisrael Shabbos, la'asos Shabbos rasam b'solam beini uvein b'nei Yisrael." Right? You say this in your Kiddush. That it already said that on Kisisa. So what are we up to? 5? 5 times already that the Torah has told you about Shabbos, and it tells you about it again here. That's awful. It's horrible. It's horrible. So of course, what will everybody tell you? They're gonna say sprung. Obviously, the pasuk has to tell you of Shabbos over here, because we're telling you that the malacha of the Mishkan is not Docha Shabbos. We're telling you that building the Mishkan does not happen on a Saturday. So you're not allowed to weave the Big Day Kahuna on a Shabbos, and you're not allowed to skin the goats or create the vessels, etc. You can't do that on Shabbos, and that's why it tells you that. Not only that, but did you know Did you know that there are 39 avos malachos? There are 39 categories of forbidden activity on Shabbos. What is the common denominator between those 39 categories? Things such as lighting fires, which for some reason comes up here, lighting fires, and Mishkan. All of the malachos that were used in the Mishkan, that is what is asur on Shabbos. That is specifically what's asur on Shabbos. So not only are you not allowed to do the Meleches HaMishkan on Saturday, meaning you're not allowed to build the Mishkan and continue doing your job on Shabbos, but also the malachos that you're not allowed to do on Shabbos are specifically the 39 malachos that you do for the Meleches HaMishkan. Now, that's very interesting. Very, very strange. Why might that be? Why would that be? So I'm going to tell you what I think, and I'm going to tell you that the way that we're reading the first section of Parshas Vayakhel, the way that I read it before, is wrong. Meaning the way in which I read it, not the words. The words were the words of the Torah. Those words are correct, and the translation were correct. But the idea and the structure of it was incorrect. So first, let's understand the philosophy of it, the behind the scenes, and then I'm going to show you again how to read the psukim, and all of a sudden it's going to look very, very different. So the reason what the Mishkan and Shabbos have to do with each other is that they are identical. The Mishkan and Shabbos are the same thing. The Mishkan is Kedusha in space, and Shabbos is Kedusha in time. Meaning. So I like to give this example. If you take a look at Maxwell's equations. So if you want to know, there's this great meme. And God said, and then there's Maxwell's equation, and there was light. Maxwell's equation is the mathematical representation of light. Now, if you have a piece of paper or a T-shirt with the mathematical example and manifestation of light, and you walk into a dark room, do you light up the room? No, of course not. Well, I don't understand. Aren't you telling me that those numbers signify light? The answer is yes, those numbers signify light. But when you express it mathematically, that's not the same thing as how you humans experience light. That is the theorem for light. That is the equation for light. That is a description of what light is using numbers and figures. Now, how does light affect a human being? That's a very different issue. Light can give you warmth, light can grow your trees, and light can enable you to see things. Okay, so Maxwell's equation and light are the same thing, but they have different manifestations. The way the light manifests to a human is different than the theorem for light. Similarly, there's a concept called holiness, a concept called Kedusha. Well, maybe we'll talk about what that means, but for right now, let's just go with there's a concept called Kedusha. You can experience Kedusha in time, and you can experience Kedusha in space. Kedusha in time is called Shabbos. That's what holiness is in time. Holiness in space is what we call the temple, which is why, of course, the word for the temple is the mikdash, the Beis HaMikdash. There's the word, kadosh, right there. Yes, Shabbos is a different manifestation of the same concept. Shabbos is holiness in time, and mikdash is holiness in space. Now, of course, this is why they have this. They're called the same word. They're not only called. Another word for the Mishkan is the Ohel Moed. The Ohel Moed, which we translate as the tent of meeting, the Ohel Moed. How do you say holidays in Hebrew, in the Torah? Moadim. Elem Moadei Hashem Mikrai Kodesh. It's the same word. I don't understand. You're telling me that the Ohel Moed refers to Mikdash, or are you telling me that Moed refers to a holiday? And the answer is yes, because a holiday is Kedusha in Zman, and a Mikdash is Kedusha in Makom. That's it. So they are the same exact concept being manifested on different wavelengths or different planes. One is in time and one is in space. One second, let me just finish the thought and then you'll tell me if you still have a question. Therefore, when we say that the things you're not allowed to do on Shabbos are the things that you need to do for the Mishkan, they are the same. There's no difference between Shabbos and Mishkan. Shabbos and Mishkan is one concept, one. So of course, the actions that you cannot do on Shabbos are the actions that you had to do for the Mishkan that the Torah tells you you're not allowed to do on Shabbos. So the Torah gives you outside for the Mishkan.
You could do it in the Mishkan.
You can't. You're not allowed to do the work to prepare for the Mishkan, for the creation of the Mishkan on Shabbos. Yes, you're allowed to do karbanos on Shabbos. You have a carbon that's specifically for Shabbos, carbon musaf, because whenever Hashem tells you this is what you do it. But the tzivoy of Shabbos means you're not allowed to create the thread for the Kohen Gadol on Shabbos. You're not allowed to bang down the metal for the tzitz on Shabbos. All of the preparation that goes into creating the Mishkan, which is what Moshe is about to command the Jews to do, that preparation is going to happen Sunday through Friday. So all of those things that you're commanded to do Sunday through Friday, you do for the Mishkan, and then you cease doing them on Shabbos. It's one commandment. They are identical. So now read the first paragraph of Parshas Vayakhel again. I'd like to point out a few words that keep popping up. Vayakhel Moshe is Kol Adas B'nai Yisrael. Kol Adas B'nai Yisrael. The whole Edah, the whole congregation of the Jews. It's interesting. Why does it have to say that? I don't know, but it does. And he says, what does he say to them? Eila hadvarim asher tziva Hashem la'asososam. Eila hadvarim. These are the things that God commands you to do. And of course, what are you convinced that he's going to say? These are the things that God commands you to do. Do the Beis HaMikdash. But instead of saying, these are the things that God commands you to do the Beis HaMikdash, he starts talking about Shabbos. And says, Sheishis yamim te'asem malacha v'yom hashvi'i elechem kodesh Shabbos Hashem. I don't understand. Why would he begin by telling me the things I'm not allowed to do? You said, Eila hadvarim, these are the things that God commanded you to do. And he says, don't do work on Shabbos. Then what is the next thing? The very next statement in Pasuk Dalet is, Vayomer Moshe, again, El Kol Adas B'nai Yisrael Lemor. Again, El Kol Adas B'nai Yisrael. Zeh hadavar asher tziva Hashem. This is the thing that God commanded. First he said, Eila hadvarim, and then he says, Zeh hadavar. Meaning there's one statement. There's one statement. And the one statement is broken into two halves. What are the two halves? The main statement is the creation of Mishkan. There's two pieces to the creation of Mishkan. One is the schedule of the labor of the Mishkan. This is how the schedule of labor goes. 6 days on, 1 day off. The second tzivoy is, these are the labors that you're going to do. So before it tells you the actual labors that you do, it tells you that the concept of labor is going to take place for 6 days and not the seventh. What labor do you refer to? The labor of Meleches HaMishkan, which is why people think you're not allowed to work on Shabbos, and nothing could be more wrong because the rabbi works on Shabbos. We're talking about Malacha. So when you say, I don't understand, how come the Torah never says I'm not allowed to do borer? The Torah never talks about borer. The Torah doesn't talk about winnowing and threshing and plowing and harvesting, and it doesn't talk about ripping. It doesn't talk about makim and patish. It doesn't talk about any of those things. How come it doesn't tell me? Oh, the rabbis say. The rabbis, I love this. The rabbis in the Talmud made up 39 categories of things I can't do because they love restricting Jews, because rabbis enjoy it when their congregants are miserable. Now,
wait,
one second, guys. Ariel's got a question.
We've already established
that there's such a thing called Shabbos. Yes.
And you don't work on Shabbos.
Yes, but we've never told you what work means until this point. We've never told you what the word milacha means. Milacha does not mean avodah. Avodah means work. Milacha is a specific category of work. What milacha can you not do? Sheishis yamim te'aseh milacha. Sheishis yamim te'aseh milacha. It's milacha that you're not allowed to do, not avodah. Avodah is what is service. So, for example, if you buy an Eved Ivri, sheish shanim ya'avod, he will work for you. Not sheish shanim ya'aseh milacha. He'll do milacha. No, for 6 years, that's avodah. Avodah means work. Malacha is specific categories of work. What are the specific categories of work that you're not allowed to do? The malacha of Meleches HaMishkan. So if you look at the structure of the parsha begins by telling you that all of the work that I'm about to tell you is going to happen in a very specific time context. And that time context is 6 days and then Shabbos.
So don't do anything.
Correct. And then after it tells you not to do it on that schedule, it then tells you what the things are. And it goes through such nitty gritty, like little infinitesimal details of things. For example, you may notice that you ask yourself, I don't understand. It's one thing you tell me I can't light a fire on a Saturday. Fine, I won't light a fire. You're telling me I'm not allowed to create a vessel. Fine, I won't create a vessel. But you're telling me I can't carry my key in the pocket.
Right. How is
Right.
that the malacha?
Thank you. How is that malacha? You're telling me I can't carry something in the Mishkan? What does carry have to do with anything? That's like saying, oh, they breathed when they made the Malachas HaMishkan. But can I tell you something interesting? If you look at the psukim that talk, it's so interesting. Oh my gosh. It tells you again and again, Hevi'u, they brought. Well, Pasuk Chav Gimel, Pasuk Chav Daled, Pasuk Chav Hey. They keep saying the same thing. The Oros Kol ish asher hinif tenufas al Hashem, v'kol ish asher nimsa ito tchelas v'agamam tal hashani v'sheish v'izim, etc. V'olos techashim heviu. They brought that. V'kol asher, next pasuk. V'kol asher nimsa ito atzei shit mechom lachas avodah heviu. They brought that. And then it says vayaviu matveh, and they brought in the next pasuk. They brought the weavings. Heviu, 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 and then the seam heviu, and these ones brought this, and these ones brought that. Why does it have to keep pointing out to you? Brought. Just say, and they brought the materials. And then I know they brought the materials. Everyone gave Nidava. The shul's doing a building fund. So they knock on your door and they say, excuse me, we've assessed you. We want $36,000 so that we can put your name up on whatever wall. This is what you're going to, great. And you donated it. You don't have to tell me and you brought the money. Obviously, you sent the check. So Moshe says, take Truma and say they took the Truma. Why does it keep pointing out, and they brought, and they brought, and they brought, and they brought? Because not only is the creation of the edifice significant, but the bringing of the items is significant. The bringing. Now, you would say to yourself philosophically, why is the bringing significant? So, something was troubling me earlier. When you bake bread, you have to bake bread for the Beis HaMikdash. So it talks about literally every single piece of baking the bread. And you understand that baking, you can't talk about baking until you talk about growing, because if you don't grow the wheat, you can't bake the bread. But you can't only talk about growing the wheat, because the harvesting, that's the easy part when you harvest the wheat. When you harvest the wheat, you got a ton of chaff. You have straw on the bottom, you got chaff on the top, and then you got these little kernels. That's really where the wheat is. So now I got to tell you about every single little action that happens one at a time after you harvest. And now you got to winnow, and then you got to thresh, because now that you have those kernels, you can't make wheat out of the kernels. You got to pulverize them. Every single step is meleches machsheves, is a thought of focus, of incredible understanding, and each action is different. And you see how finely tuned the universe is, that you require all of these processes to do something as seemingly benign as baking a bagel. Look at all of the actions that have to go into baking a bagel. That's number one. Number two, I was thinking to myself,
That's why you can't do it.
That's why you can't do it.
Because it all leads up. It's only for the Mishkan.
Yes, because it created the Mishkan.
The whole universe. And you mentioned any activity, I am sure I can find it.
In the 39?
Yeah.
No, so learn the 39 and you'll see what the parameters are. You're allowed to lift weights on Shabbos. You're allowed to jump up and down, do jumping jacks. You're allowed to run up the stairs. You're allowed to drag a couch. You're allowed to eat things. You can do a ton of things on Shabbos, but there are very specific things that you can't do. And this is this is the common denominator of the specific things. Once again, holiness in time, holiness in place, being identical, and therefore identically identified in the word of Moed. Now, yes. This is troubling to you.
I can write a formula.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. But a human doesn't experience the formula.
Correct.
What I don't get is, one thing it's on a page, but the transference, when it becomes alive, like,
yes,
it's like dead on a page.
It's not dead on a page. It's a different representation of the idea. The point is, there are different ways for things to be experienced. So the fact that humans experience it in a certain way doesn't mean that it doesn't have a different function. Doesn't mean that it can't be experienced on a different plane. So you can understand what light is without seeing the light. You can feel light in addition to seeing it, different properties of the thing. One is a manifestation of your ability to feel things, and the other is your ability to see things. So that's, again, the same thing that's manifesting in two different ways. That's what we're saying. So you understand, you intuit that there's a difference between time and space, but there's Kedusha in both. That's the point. So we're saying that the concept of Kedusha, there's no difference. If you shine a Kedusha meter in a spatial zone, it's going to look like a Beis HaMikdash. And if you shine Kedusha in a time zone, it's going to look like Shabbos. That's the idea. And therefore, the pasuk is really giving you one tzivoy that's broken into two, and that's why the language mirrors. It's always el kol adas b'nei Yisrael because it's the same conversation, and that's why it's zeh hadavar eila hadvarim. It's the same words. And then what happens at the end of it when he finally finishes telling them what to do? He finishes telling them what to do, and the pasuk says, in pasuk chav, he finishes telling them, "Vayitzu kol adas b'nei Yisrael l'nefnei Moshe." And again, kol adas b'nei Yisrael. So it says kol adas b'nei Yisrael thrice. First, when he tells them about Shabbos. Second, when he tells them about Malachas HaMishkan. And third, when they take their leave, to point out to you that it's one conversation. And then they left. And what did they do the second they left? They began, which strongly indicates to me that they probably, they hit their target very quickly. Other times? Oh, that's fantastic. So Ariel's like, well then, right. So Ariel says, why are you telling me about Shabbos 4 different times? So of course, the answer is because there are also different elements of Shabbos. The Shabbos that we're telling you about directly juxtaposed to the concept of Mishkan is the fact that it's Kedusha in Zman, that it's holiness in time. The idea of Shabbos on a cosmic level has nothing to do with humans, and it has nothing to do with space, and therefore it's all the way in Bereshis when it says Vayakhel Pekudei vayom hashvi malachto asher asa. That's a cosmic element of Shabbos. So Shabbos is many things. So when you talk about the element of Shabbos that is bracha, that is the source of all bracha, that's the Shabbos that it talks to you about by the man and the lechem mishnah that happens on Friday. So it says al kain nasan Hashem lechem yomayim. So there are different aspects of Shabbos. So the Torah has to tell Shabbos to you 5 times because they're all different. The one that is telling you here is about the synthesis between holiness in time and holiness in space. I know you got to put that in the pipe and smoke it a little bit. It's pretty cool, but that's the idea. That's the idea. Now, so what happens immediately after this, I think is so cool. Okay, so now we're in Sheni. And by the way, we can literally talk forever about the Parshas of Vayakhel Pekudei, but we won't. So it says something here that is I think exceedingly strange. All the people that wanted to help, they came. They all showed up and brought. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know if I finished the previous point. That if you are going to bring, just imagine for a moment. Imagine for a moment that you have a golden necklace, not that sits in your jewelry box, a golden necklace that you're like Mr. T. You always wear this golden necklace. You're like, this is a piece of you. And you want to give that to the Beis HaMikdash to melt down because they're going to put that in the wall of the Beis HaMikdash. You think that the giving is more significant than the bringing? When you bring your necklace to Moshe, you're skipping and jumping and dancing and singing. The bringing is significant. Right. And that's why it keeps pointing out, hey viu, hey viu, hey viu. And not only that, but there's a difference in the way that people bring. So for example, when it talks about, first it talks about bringing the gold, then it talks about bringing the silver, then it talks about bringing the copper, because there's different levels of bringing. And that's why if you look at the zahav, the gold in Pasuk Chaf Beis, it says, Vayavohu anashim al hanashim, and the men came with the women. Kol nediv leiv, everyone who was generous of heart, heviu chach vanechem vanezem mitabas lechumaz kol kli zahav, all their golden jewelry, necklaces. The kol ish asher hinif tenufas zahav ladonai, and every man, here they say, every man who raised up an offering of gold to Hashem. But of course, that's not true. That's not a precise translation of what hinif tenufas zahav ladonai means. Hinif tenufa means waved a waving. How do I know that tenufa means wave? Because there's one of the elements of a korban is called tenufa. You wave the korban. You pick up the shok, the thigh of the animal, and you wave it. It's like, Simba in the Simba, right? You present. That's what tenufa means. So zahav is heinif tenufa, wave the waving, because when it comes to giving gold, that's not just given. It's ceremonial. You present it. You wave it. Now notice the next pasuk tells you about commodities like skins, and that just says heviu, they brought. The next pasuk tells you about silver. Kol meirim teruma, anyone who lifted a lifting, because truma we say means a donation, but that's not true. The word teruma means leharim, to raise. So the first level is waving. The second level is raising. because obviously giving silver is not the same thing as giving gold. So they have different words. Different words. Now, there's something here that's very, very interesting. You'll notice that again in Pasuk Chav Beis it says Vayavohu ha'anashim al hanashim, and the men came with the women. But of course, if you have a little bit of an appreciation for the subtlety of the language, you realize that something here is very, very off. Because ordinarily, when the Torah would say lavo al, that a man vayavo, he came al on, that is a sexual reference. Sexual congress, intercourse is called lavo al, to come upon. So here, when it says vayavo ha'anashim al hanashim, the men came upon the women. I mean, oh my gosh, you're telling me that so here the Rishonim explain, oh, kimoim, it means like with. Say with. You're telling me that you're using a different word. You're telling me that you're using a different word for with that means the same thing as with. It just so happens to have a sexual connotation, but like, probably don't notice that. Are you kidding me? And it's specifically male and female. It's the men came on the women. So it's like, I mean, come on. That can't be that's not an accident, right? That's crazy. So I want to say like this. Obviously, al also can mean with. That's clear. The Ibn Ezra gives other cases of where you see al. Al lechem habikurim tinufa, which means that this part of the carbon will come with, not up top it. So of course the answer is, I think, if im, which means with, will do, why would you say al, which technically means on, that you're using to mean with? And the answer is because there's two different ways that something can come with something else. One way is many different things can come as equals. When things come as equals, they come with. When things come as adjuncts, they come on. That's the difference. There's a main force and a secondary force. The secondary force doesn't come with the main force. It comes because of, due to, and atop the main force. Which means, who's the main force coming to the Mishkan? The men or the women? The women. The men came on the women, with the women, secondary to the women. That's what it's saying. Really. So here when it says the men came with the women, it uses a specific term to tell you they're secondary to the women. They are. Now, why would they be secondary to the women? Well, it's so cool.
Their jewelry.
Women's jewelry, right? What'd the men do with their jewelry? They built an egel. Who didn't give their jewelry to the egel? The women. Who was the driving force to give their jewelry to the Beis HaMikdash? The women. And that's why it says, if you read the pasuk, this is so cool, right? So read the pasuk. The pasuk says, pasuk up days. Vayavohu ha'anashim al hanashim, and the men came with the women. Kol nediv leiv, everyone, every generous of heart, Heviu brought chach vanezem v'tabas v'chumaz kol kli zahav, which means bracelets, nose rings, rings, body ornaments. V'chol ish asher hinif tinufas zahav l'Adonai, and every man who waved the waving of gold to God. What comes first, the jewelry or the waving of gold? The jewelry. Who's the ones with the jewelry?
Women.
The women. Who's the ones with the waving of gold? The men. The men have money. They have gold bullion. They have blocks of gold. The women have jewelry. Which does it tell you first in the pasuk? The women's jewelry. Now, when they say bracelets, nose rings, rings, and body ornaments, so I like to say this to our Torah every year because it's so it's awesome. But now this year it got even better because all of a sudden it comes literally, you see, never noticed this before, but every year, you go deeper than the year before. So when they say chach vanezem tabas v'chumaz, so they say it's bracelets. Here, yes, bracelets. Is that what it was? Bracelets, nose rings, rings, body ornaments. Which word means body ornaments? The answer is kumaz. Now, what they're not telling you is that kumaz is a vaginal ornament. Yeah, that's what it is. They say body ornament. They say body ornament because who knows who might read this. But Rashi says kumaz is a genital ring. And therefore, he says kumaz means kan makom zima, which means here is the place of promiscuity. That's why it's called that. So that means that people were bringing golden genital ornaments to the Mishkan. Wow. Okay. I mean, that's awesome. Hey man, jewelry, gold is gold. We'll take it, right? Unbelievable. But here's the part that doesn't make any sense. It says later on, before Rashi, that the women brought their mirrors their copper mirrors they brought, and it was made into the kior. So my uncle points out, this is 1 second, over there Rashi says that Moshe did not want to take them. Moshe found them disgusting because they were asuyim li'etzer hara. They were made for, of course, they're made for illicit thoughts. The whole point of a mirror is to look pretty, and the only reason you would want to look pretty is because you're going thumpity thump in the club, right? Otherwise, why gotta look pretty if you're staying home? So obviously it's used for, Yetzer hara. Moshe doesn't want it. And Hashem says, no. Elech avivin alai min hakol. These are my favorite. These mirrors are my favorite because, we'll talk about why they were the favorite, but, and Moshe takes them. But of course, the simple question is, you're telling me that Moshe had a problem with a mirror and he didn't have a problem with a kumas? I mean, that's insane. That's insane. So they bring chach vanezem and tabas v'chumas, and Moshe don't say a peep. And then they bring mirrors, and he's like, oh, mirrors. It's crazy talk. It's crazy. So of course, what's the answer? The answer is simple, because the gold was melted down. So who cares what it was in a former life? Now it's an element, right? If I throw the gold into a big furnace and I melt it down, and now I got a whole big block of gold, who cares that whatever percentage of the gold that came from this was used for this or that? It doesn't matter. But the mirrors were not melted.
What do you do?
What indeed? The mirrors were pounded together into the kior as such. They were not melted.
What?
The kior. The kior is the wash basin. The wash basin. The kior with a mallet and tremendous wisdom can do that.
But you got to connect them.
Yes, you can do that. However they do that.
Melt it to get
I don't know how they did it, but they did it with a welding set. I don't know. However they did it. But the point is, I'm not a Marrakech. I don't know. But the point is, they did it. So Moshe says, what are you talking about? How could you use this material the way that it is? To which HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, no, Moshe, you don't understand. It's these mirrors that allow me to even have my children. Because in Mitzrayim, the men gave up. When Paro was saying, Kol ben ayilot ayora tashlichuhu, the men gave up. L'shav anu amelim. And the Gemara says, it's so beautiful, man. It's so beautiful. So the Gemara says that the women would take out buckets of water and fish out in the fields, and they would take their mirrors and they would go out to their husbands in the field, and they would flirt with them, and they would show them in the mirror, look, I'm prettier than you. And then they would get the men to, step up a little bit. And then they kept the Jews going. Which, by the way, is totally cool. I just want to point in tangentially. I've never said this before, so you'll hear it for the first time here. It's very interesting that it says in that pasuk that the Gemara is quoting Gemara and Sota, and the Gemara is quoting over there when it's talking about what the women did to seduce the men back in Mitzrayim with the mirrors. It quotes the pasuk from Yecheskel that we say every year, but we don't say this part of the pasuk. We only say the end of the pasuk. We say the pasuk in the Haggadah, where very, very famous pasukim, because we say them in the Haggadah, which means Hashem came over us and He sees us. And you are mispossesses b'damayach. You're just rolling over in your own blood. And Hashem says to us, b'damayach you will live in your blood. Through your blood you shall live. Through your blood you shall live. But what you didn't, but it also says, Vatavoi ba'adi adoyim. Vatavoi ba'adi adoyim. You showed up ba'adi adoyim. Now the words adi adoyim, the Gemara says, Al tikri adi adoyim ela edrei adarim, which means there were tons and tons of babies that were born this way, because the word adarim means flocks. As you find by Yaakov when he sent by Yishlach Yaakov Malachim El Yisrael Vachiv Artz Seir Stay Adom, when he sends the presents to his brother, it says over there Eider Livado. So it means flocks. So the Gemara says, read it as Edrei Adarim, which means tons and tons of kids were born this way. But the real word is Ba'adi Adoim, which means jewelry. So it's just interesting because the pasuk that the Gemara is connecting over here, the concept of the women bringing their mirrors and seducing the men and having all those children, is talking about jewelry, which is exactly what they're bringing over here to the Beis Hamikdash. So in any event, so these mirrors, Hashem says, are His favorite thing in the entirety of the Beis Hamikdash. And again, of course, that was the gift of the women. Now, what does the kior do? Well, the kior, of course, washes the hands and feet of the Kohanim when they go out to do the service by the Mizbeach, or they want to go into the Kodesh. And it also, of course, checks the Sota. A woman who was unfaithful to her husband is checked from the water that's in the kior, which was built with the mirrors of the women who created Klal Yisrael based on their fidelity and commitment. So the woman who's a sota, take a drink of water from that guy. from the mirrors of the women who saved Klal Yisrael. And that's why Moshe doesn't have any problem taking a chumaz. And that's why it happens to be that the pasuk that talks about the women, kol nadiv leiv, the women are first, the men are secondary, and they're bringing their most private jewelry. And it's just awesome. And that's why, of course, they never do the egel, etc., etc. You know, I think it's just insanely cool. Now, next, pasuk says, Moshe says to Bnei Yisrael, Re'u, see, Kara Hashem b'shem Betzalel ben Uri ben Hur l'matei Yehuda. Hashem has called Betzalel ben Uri ben Hur l'matei Yehuda, and he's going to be the architect of. I'll tell you one more thing about the women. I want to tell you one more thing about the women. Okay, so there's. I learned this in grade school. I learned this when I was a little kid. You're probably familiar with this measure. It's very, very famous measure. When they wove, you need wool. The whole Mishkan is wool, right? It's all skins, right? It's all skins. And there's a lot of wool going on. There's a lot of wool in the clothing and stuff like that. But when you go to get wool, let's say you want a nice Xenia suit. So Xenia has a relationship with the greatest sheep farm in Scotland, where they go and they pick, what is it called? The Vera d'Oro or something. They call it the Golden Fleece. And there's the most expensive sheep in the world. And from that sheep, we can make 100 suits of only the finest, blah, 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 blah. What do? They take the shaver, right? And they shave down the sheep, they shear it. They take all that wool, and this is the greatest cashmere in the world, blah, 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 great. That's not what happened in the Mishkan. They didn't shear the sheep. In the Mishkan, they wove from the animal. You ever heard that? No? True story. You ever heard that? It's just banging around in your brain somewhere. I can see it. Okay, so the women wove atop the living animal. So if you look at the pasuk, the pasuk says in pasuk Chaf Hey, and every woman who was wise of heart wove with her hands. And they brought a weaving of these various colored dyes. Now, so Rashi explains what's Isha Chachmat Leiv, women who are wise of heart. Why do you have to be that wise of heart to weave? Honestly, I've been to Hialeah. There's a bunch of women over there that are weaving things. Maybe they're wise. I don't have any indication that they are. Doesn't seem to be like the hardest thing in the world to do, frankly. No, I'm not saying that I'm any kind of a weaver, but I assure you, if I wanted to be, I could probably figure it out. So but so therefore Rashi says to Chachma Yisera, it was an added Chachma, because if you think you can get an animal to stand still while you weave it off its back, right? That's a Chachma slave. So it's a different level of Chachma. Not that they were sitting there crocheting a yarmulke, like we used to do in 1983. But no, it means that when they wove all of the curtains, they wove it mamish off the back of the animal. Eventually, right, when it's finished and now it's all woven together, I suppose they probably went snip, or maybe they pulled it out. I don't know. That's unclear to me. It doesn't tell. I'm not sure. Maybe it does say somewhere. I haven't read it, but I'm not aware of how they did it. I'm just aware of what it is that it says that they did. But so that's very, very cool. Now, can I just ask you one very simple question? Simple question. Again, famous medrash. Why? I mean, who bloody cares? It's just like, why do I need the geniuses? I'll take the idiot, just shear the damn thing, and we'll make it into a curtain. Like, who cares? Let my sheep go. So everyone knows the medrash, but it doesn't make any sense. Like, why? It's so weird. But then the bizarreness continues, because what's the next pasuk? I mean, get this. That's pasuk Chaf Hey. V'chol isha chachma, slave is pasuk Chaf Hey. Pasuk Chaf Vav. V'chol anashim asher nasa liban asana b'chachma tavu es ha'izim. And all the women whose hearts lifted them with wisdom wove the goats. I'm sorry, didn't you just say that in verse 25? Isn't that exactly what you just said in Chaf Hey? Chaf Hey is every wise-hearted woman spun with her hands, and they brought the spun yarn of turquoise, purple, scarlet wool, and linen. All the women whose hearts inspired them with wisdom spun the goat hair. You already said that. So what are you doing? What are you doing? So, oh man, I'll tell you what maybe the pshat is. Now you'd be like, oh well, the Targum Yonasan Ben Uziel says that Asher Nasa Liba No Sana. That's the pasuk that tells you that they did this unbelievable work. The problem is that Rashi says it's going on the previous pasuk. So you've got a problem. Can I tell you what I think the answer is? I tell you like this. What is the obvious difference between pasuk Chaf Hey and pasuk Chaf Vav? 25 and 26. 25 is singular. V'chol isha chachma slave. Every woman who was smart of heart, biyadeha, in her hands, tavu, they wove. What is the next pasuk? V'chol hanashim, and all the women, plural. Asher nasa liban, that their hearts raised them. Otana, them, plural. B'chachma. What's the difference? The difference is a singular and a plural. What does that tell you? That tells you, I believe, that there is a double wisdom that is happening. Number one, every woman is weaving off of the living animal.
Right.
Number two, they are weaving them together. Understand?
Women or the sheep?
The women. So there are five, just for example, there are 5 women. Each woman is weaving this sheep. And then they are weaving their sheep together. So one is a wisdom of the singular, and the other is the wisdom of the plural.
And again, why?
I haven't spoken about why yet. First, there's why, the difference between pasuk 25 and pasuk 26. The difference between 25 chaf and chaf vav is singular versus plural. What does that tell you? It tells you that there are 2 layers of wisdom. Why would there be 2 layers of wisdom? Because you can train a tight end to be an unbelievable tight end. You can train him to block, you can train him to run routes, you can train him to catch. If you don't practice him and have him drill with the offensive line, how good is his blocking going to be? Oh, I think we know. Very poor indeed. But he's a great blocker. Blocking is a collective endeavor. It's a collective endeavor, which means it's not enough. You have to have your position down, and you have to have your position down within the hole. And that's the 25, and that's 26. And now that brings us again to our original question, which is, who cares? So let's just think about it. What I'm about to tell you, I have no confidence that this is correct. Okay? But I'm going to tell you anyway. It's just,
One doesn't talk
I mean, maybe there are. No, not dumb work. No. No. Not to the best of my knowledge, but I'm thinking like this. If you are shearing the goat and then taking the hair and doing something with it, then the hair of the goat is a commodity. The hair is a commodity. So I can have ears of corn, and I can have heels of shoes, and I can have wool of sheep. It's a commodity. If I weave a living animal, I'm not weaving wool. I'm weaving an animal.
Okay.
That's the difference. Meaning,
And therefore, who cares?
meaning.
Yeah.
So it's, I can only take it so far, right? I'm loath to take it one space beyond where the logic goes. Okay, so we can. What I'm saying is more of a way to think about it than an answer as to why. The way to think about it would be there's a difference between taking piles of hair and turning them into curtains and weaving a living animal. Now, what is the idea behind weaving a living animal? You're essentially taking the animal and making the animal into a curtain. It's a different thing.
Let me ask you, is it the source or the wisdom of the women, or for some reason in the history, it's the source of the sheep? Because I'm thinking.
The squeeze of the women and the squeeze of the sheep.
Because remember, like the dogs did.
Right, and then that's an interesting Dasa Canaan. That's a Dasa Canaan. What you're quoting is Dasa Canaan Valiatosos, who says by nevela, la kelev tashlichonoso, that you're supposed to throw the nevela if there's a carcass in your chicken farm that you're not allowed to eat. Then you throw it to the dog. And over there, Dasa Canaan says, why are you throwing it to the dog? Because it's a schus for l'chol yisrael lo yachratz kelev l'shono by Max Paros. I don't know. But what I will say is that since we were saying before that Mikdash is essentially Shabbos just in space, okay, well, Shabbos in time, of course, the original Shabbos, and therefore the underlying primal force of Shabbos is, of course, evolutionary. That's what Shabbos is. Shabbos means that there is a sof ma'aseh, as we say in Lechadodi. We say sof ma'aseh b'machshavat tchila. The end result was the first thought. What does that mean? The end result was the first thought. It means if I say to myself, I want to build a car. Okay, I have to build a car. Well, in order to build a car, now you're gonna have to figure out what the engineering is behind the car. Now you're gonna have to mine the metal to build the car. Now you're gonna have to get the rubber for the wheels, et cetera, et cetera. But the end result was a car. That was your first thought. You didn't say, let me buy wheels. You said, let me make a car. How do I make a car? Here are the details to make a car. Okay. What Shabbos tells you cosmically is that what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted at the end, which was man, was the first idea. The idea was to have man. In order to have man, I need to have a world that can be inhabited by man. That's the idea.
And Shabbos is part of that.
So Shabbos is the idea that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is creating a world, a simulation in which, a board, as it were, in which man can exist, for man to be able to exist. And therefore, it had to be a certain way and not a different way. So he builds the world towards a specific end. And when it's done, V'hinei tov ma'od. And now everything was very good. Everything is perfect. V'hinei tov ma'od. Vayakhulu hashamayim v'aretz v'chol tzva'am. They were finished. Vayakhel Elokim. And Hashem finished. Now you'll notice, of course, the Medrash points out that the exact same language is used here. Exact same language. It says as follows. It says, excuse me. Sorry. They brought all of the truma to Moshe. Vayikalei ha'am mehavi. They stopped. Vayikalei. Vayechal. Says at the very end when Moshe sees what happens, Vayar Moshe es kol ha'avodah, and Moshe saw everything that was done. Vehine, and behold, it was done. Kasher tziva Hashem es Moshe, as Hashem has commanded Moshe. What does that exactly mean? It's exactly the same thing that Hashem says by Ma'aseh Bereshis. Vayar Elokim es kol asher asa v'hinei tov ma'od. And God saw all that was done, and behold, it was very good. Here it's Vayar Moshe es kol asher na'asa v'hinei, and it was not tov ma'od, very good, but exactly as God had said. The language is the same. The Medrash goes through explaining how the curtains, that's like HaKadosh Baruch Hu with the celestial bodies. And it breaks down each issue of the Mishkan in accordance with Ma'aseh Bereshis. Because of course, as we said before, it's just another manifestation of the same exact idea. Now, in order to really put this, I think, into perspective, this is being done by Bitzalel. Well, let's think for a moment. What does the word Bitzalel mean? The word Bitzalel means Bitzel El, in the shade of God. Now, why is he called in the shade of God? So it's a very famous Gemara. The Gemara says that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe to build the Mishkan, he told him, Aseli Kalim uMishkan. Meaning the way that it's spoken in Parshas Truma, first it tells you about the Aron, the Shulchan, the Menorah, the Urios, and then first it starts telling you about the Krushim and all of the structural things. First it tells you about the furniture, and then it tells you about the house. When Moshe tells that to Bitzalel says to him, Moshe, that's not how you make a house. When you make a house, first you build the structure, then you put in the furniture. And Moshe's like, wow, what a genius. Bitzel Kel Hayisa, are you in the shade of God? That's what God meant. Wow, you must be in the shade of God, right? What a genius. So basically, what it sounds, there's all sorts of problems with that exchange, which we've addressed in the past. So I'm not going to talk about it now, but let's just address his name. Moshe says, oh, Bitzalel, the shade of God. We're assuming what that means is he could have called him Chachamel, the wisdom of God, the Uel, the knowledge of God, Bakiel, the genius of God. The point is he's giving him a name that shows that he's so smart and he understands godly wisdom. That would be the idea. And the answer is that is completely false. It is the most precise name you've ever heard in your life. Bitzel El. Bitzel El. Oh my goodness. Does not get more precise than this. Here's what it means. What is Tseil? Tseil means shade. What is shade? Shade. S-H-A-D-E. Shade. I don't mean a demon. A shade. Whenever you see a shadow of something, right? So you do little butterfly. So on the wall, there's a butterfly. Is there really a butterfly on the wall? No, there's a butterfly over here. But because the light shines over here, there's a shadow on the wall. The shadow on the wall shows you about a structure that's not there. Shows you about a structure that's somewhere else. What's Bitzalel building? Mishkan. Mishkan is a manifestation of a spiritual reality somewhere else. He's Bitzel El. He's the shade of God because he's the one that creates a building that's a facsimile to Maxwell's equation. He's taking metal and skin and blood and hair, and he's crafting in the equivalent of holiness. That's what Bezalel's doing.
Following, so there are no architectural plans in the public.
It's not about the architectural plans. It's about, and it's not about the dimensions of things. It's much the ideas of the dimensions that it's giving to you are.
So what's he bringing to the table? Somebody else didn't.
So what he's
if he's reading the book,
right. That's what I'm saying. It's not about the like. Listen, I can make a box. I'm a moron with 2 left thumbs. I can build a box. I mean, goodness gracious, how hard is it to build a box? And the answer is, it's not about the box. You have to build a box that is the physical metal manifestation of God's Merkava, of God's chariot.
Right.
That's a very different thing. I can tell you the size of that box all day. You're not going to be able to build a box that is reminiscent of God's chariot. You'll be like, that's a golden box. I mean, go to the Taj Mahal, go to Versailles, plenty of golden boxes. It's not about golden box. Can you build a candelabrum that is equatable to the concept of wisdom and enlightenment? Can you build a golden table that is the manifestation of the concept of economics?
Yeah, but at the end of the day, once I see what he built, then I can go build the same thing, no?
Again, so it's not, we can reduce it to table.
So is it
we can reduce it to table. We're saying that Bezalel is able to symbolize in this metal box the idea. That's what makes him so brilliant. Not just the book, everyone. It would be obvious if you saw this mizbeach, you would understand that this mizbeach is a manifestation of the koach of kahuna.
But now let's bring it down to physicality.
Yeah.
He built it.
Mm-hmm.
I want to franchise this thing.
Right.
So now I can see, there's 38-degree angle.
Yeah, you could replicate it once it's built, sure.
And then
you can replicate it once. Sure. Once it's done, it's done. But you're asking a question. I once asked this question. I asked this question regarding Van Gogh. My mother's an artist, and with this I'll end. I asked my mother the following question a long time ago. Said, you can buy 100,000 copies of Van Gogh, that forgeries that are so good that the only person in the world who could tell the difference is the director of the Smithsonian with an electron microscope.
Okay.
So if it's so good, if it looks exactly the same, then what value is, what's the big deal to the original? Other than sentimentality. Like, and you're gonna pay $40 million for a 5x5 picture of sentimentality.
Prototype. That's
the bringing of the issue, the bringing down of the idea and putting it on paper is what you're capturing. Okay. Once it's captured, of course you can replicate it. That's not the point. The point is, can you capture it? Once Bezalel captured the essence of menorah-ism, now you can create 100 menorahs. The problem is the first menorah. The problem is the first aron. Well, there's only ever been one aron.
So we took a big chance of giving the job.
Hashem says, Re'u, you could see it was so clear. Re'u kara Hashem b'shem. So it doesn't say when Bezalel is selected, it doesn't say that Bezalel was selected. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Moshe, Re'ei kara Hashem b'shem Bezalel ben Uri ben Chur l'matah Yehuda, which means see. Hashem has called out the name of Bezalel ben Uri ben Chur. Now what that tells you, yes, but Hashem says Re'ei, which means see, look, perceive. And when Moshe speaks to the Jewish people, he says Re'u, see, look, perceive. Meaning that when you see this guy, it's going to be abundantly clear. Abundantly clear. You're like, oh yeah, I get it. Furthermore, he's not just Bezalel, he's Bezalel ben Uri ben Hur. This son of this, son of this. Why? Well, because when you're connecting him to Hur, obviously it means that one of the reasons why Bezalel became the person who Bezalel became was because of who his grandfather was. His grandfather was Hur. Who was Hur? Hur, you've seen him twice before, once only hinted at and once, really twice also, but anyway. Hur is Moshe's nephew. He is the son of Miriam and Kalev. Hur was the one who was killed when he tried to tell the Jews to stop building the Egel. So of course his grandson is going to be the one who builds the anti-Egel, which is the Beis HaMikdash. Hur was also the one who stood on the other side of Moshe from Aaron during the battle of Amalek. Moshe's hands were up and he was tired, and Aaron stood on one side and Hur stood on the other side. So essentially, who's Hur representing? Well, there's 3 Amram sins. There's Moshe, there's Aaron, and there's Miriam. So in this case, there's Moshe, there's Aaron, and there's Miriam's son, Hur. So Hur, when Moshe goes up on the mountain, he says, anyone who has a problem, go to Aaron and Hur. And then, of course, that's why Hur was killed. And the Gemara in Sanhedrin darshans it from Vayiven Mizbeach Lefanav is really, I'll take it Vayiven Mizbeach Lefanav, Ela Vayiven Mizavoach Lefanav. which is on page, I think it's 11, if you want to look over there. Daf Yud Aleph Amud Aleph in Sanhedrin. Ayin Sham B'Tim Sahar Nachas. Look there, and you will find much delight. Have a beautiful Shabbos. Chazak, chazak, v'nis chazik.
And